Hey guys, it's Gregor, aka Vincent van Gogh, and in this video I'm going to be talking about warships of the Koninklijke Marine, the Royal Netherlands Navy. The Dutch have been talked about at length by various members of the World of Warships community, and fairly so. The Royal Netherlands Navy has a history that dates centuries back and over the course of hundreds of years. Dutch trade ships managed an economical empire that was respected throughout all of Europe. During World War II, though often overlooked in the history books, the Dutch Navy handled a great deal of responsibilities and held headquarters in London, present-day Sri Lanka, and Western Australia. They wielded a mix of indigenously developed and outsourced weapons during the war, and built a good deal of their own ships following the war when the Netherlands became a part of NATO. A Dutch tech tree is a topic of dispute within the forum community. Some say it's totally possible, and others say it's totally impossible. I'm not going to take sides on that particular topic, and I'll try to keep things simple by talking about some of the Netherlands' noteworthy vessels from the Second World War. I'll open with the Dutch and their plans for a battlecruiser that never really saw fruition but would be a very interesting premium ship to add to the game. Design 1047 consisted of a series of plans to create a ship that could counter Japanese heavy cruisers attacking Dutch colonies in the East Indies. It was ordered on February the 17th, 1939. As far as development hell is concerned, this ship was the hallmark of it, going through several different drafts on paper, particularly from the Germans, and it never saw fruition, so everything concerning the vessel would consist of projected statistics. Main guns would consist of 9 German 283mm cannons, placed in 3 triple-barreled turrets, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. Secondaries, 12 120mm guns. Anti-aircraft guns, 40mm Bofors, and a total of 7 twin mounts, in addition to 16 13.2mm machine guns in twin mounts. Armor was to be implemented with a turtleback design typical of German influence, with a main belt of 250mm inclined by about 10 degrees. Deck armor was about 130mm in total. Ideally, the ship would have reached a top speed of 34 knots in a straight line. All in all, this ship, like most battlecruisers, would have been more suited for fighting enemy heavy cruisers than it was capital ships. Tiering? Tier 6 or 7, I suppose. Battlecruisers are somewhat awkward to place, since they wouldn't be very suited to fighting battleships, but could effectively fight like tiered cruisers. Who knows? I really like the look of this ship, though, and I would love to see it featured somehow in-game. That's the 1047. Let's talk about cruisers, of which the Dutch had several. This is the Java-class light cruiser, built to be the backbone of the Dutch cruiser force in the Indies as a counter to the Japanese Chikuma reconnaissance cruiser. Like many Dutch warships, this class resembled German design characteristics. However, unfortunately, at the time these ships were commissioned, they were quite outdated. As for statistics, its main armament would consist of 10 150mm guns in single mounts, so gun caliber typical of a light cruiser. The secondaries would be 4 75mm guns, and her AA battery would consist of 8 40mm Bofors mounted in 4 twin mounts, as well as 8 50 caliber machine guns. Armor is negligible, a 75mm belt and a deck of about the same in size. She could reach a top speed of about 31 knots under full power, which for a cruiser at about Tier 3 isn't too bad. I say Tier 3 because I don't think this ship could really fit at any other level, maybe Tier 4 if you were pushing it. Her main shtick would be her number of guns. Like the Kolberg, she can bring a good deal of them around to a broadside, but she would pack a good punch at lower tiers with those 6-inchers. Basically move around the map at high speed and spam HE where appropriate. I don't know much about this ship's gun characteristics, although they were manufactured in Germany, so that might tell you a few things. Another famous Dutch cruiser class is the De Ruyter class. The De Ruyter was largely built as an improvement of the Java class, however at the time this ship was being designed, the Netherlands was being affected by the economic recession of the time period, and a largely vocal pacifist movement criticized the government's efforts to make this ship. The only one of these ships was laid down September 16th, 1933. So at this point in time, competing with vessels like the British Leander, her main battery and armor were somewhat lacking, but she was equipped with very good fire control systems as well as a potent set of anti-aircraft guns. De Ruyter was named flagship of the Netherlands East Indies Squadron and sunk during the Battle of the Java Sea in 1942. Her main battery consisted of 7 150mm guns mounted in 3 dual-barreled turrets and 1 single mount, with a single mount and the dual turret at the front and the other dual turrets at the back. No secondary batteries, though she had room to mount a Fokker flight plane via catapult. and her AA is very good with 10 40mm Bofors cannons and 8 Browning machine guns. Armor is effectively not worth mentioning and could be penned by just about everything it faces. Max speed, 32 knots. This doesn't seem like a bad ship to place at tier 4. This is a very versatile warship that could function effectively as a support ship for battleships or carriers. Her main battery is good enough to HE spam bigger targets, and I imagine she can fend off destroyers well enough. I have one more cruiser to talk about though, and she looks pretty good too. I think she'd be a huge addition to the game.
Ship is a mess.
This is the Tromp-class cruiser. Her development history is a bit amusing to me. The Dutch population at the time wasn't willing to spend more money on big warships, so instead of calling this ship a cruiser, they named it a flotilla leader. I like cruiser in technicality only. She was really more like a large destroyer. 2 of these flotilla leaders were made. I'm going to talk about the Tromp exclusively. She had a sister ship, but the Tromp had more stuff on it. Main armament consisted of 6 150mm guns arranged in 3 dual-barreled turrets, 2 in the front, 1 in the back. No secondaries. Her AA consisted of 8 40mm Bofors cannons arranged in twin mounts, 4 50-caliber machine guns, and 4 75mm cannons. Loads and loads of AA like the Ruyter. Tromp also had the distinction of mounting torpedoes, 2 triple-tube mounts for a total of 6. Armor is effectively useless, and not really worth mentioning. She can get penned by everything, really. As far as her speed, about 32 knots in a straight line. This is a pretty well-armed support ship like her predecessor, the Ruyter. I imagine she could work well at tier 5. She'd have a hard time fighting light-tiered heavy cruisers, but wouldn't have such troubles with other light cruisers and destroyers. A battleship with a Tromp supporting her would also be very powerful. This cruiser could shoot down enemy aircraft and screen for destroyers easily. In conclusion, Dutch cruisers shared a lot of similarities to German ships, so maybe something like this where the player has the option of going down a separate line for a few tiers, or they could be incorporated into a miscellaneous European tree, or added as premiums. Let's finish up with a couple destroyers, of which they almost exclusively suffered tragic fates during the war, unfortunately. Still, we'll talk about them. The first of these is the Admiralen-class destroyer. This vessel was similar to the British HMS Ambuscade, and incorporated many hard-learnt lessons from the First World War. It was also modified in certain aspects to be more suitable to function in the East Indies. 8 of them were built, and they were all lost during the Japanese assault in the Pacific. They were made in 2 groups. I'm going to talk about the second group. So 4 120mm guns as its main battery with a 75mm gun as a secondary, 4 40mm AA guns, and 4 50-cal machine guns as her anti-aircraft suite, and 6 torpedo tubes arranged in 2 triple-tube mounts. Interestingly enough, the ship also had room to carry a seaplane, but it wasn't mounted by catapult, and had to be lowered into the sea by a crane, so I doubt that would be implemented in-game. Top speed of 34 knots in a straight line. Another destroyer fielded by the Dutch that was commissioned early on in the war. This is the Gerard Kallenberg class. 2 of these ships total were made, one of them being captured by the Germans and the other being made in Britain after the Netherlands was occupied by Nazi Germany. Since the Admiralen class was outdone by contemporary Japanese designs, these ships were made to supersede them. As designed, her armament consisted of 5 120mm guns and 2 dual-barreled mounts and 1 single mount, no secondaries. Anti-aircraft suite consisted of 4 40mm cannons and 4 50-cal machine guns. Her torpedo armament, 8 total, mounted in 2 quadruple tubes. Top speed in a straight line was pretty daggone quick at 37.5 knots. As far as tiering goes, I suppose the ship would do fine at tier 5. It's a fairly basic ship like the Admiralen, but if it were ever included in-game, I'm sure some people would play it. It's important to note the characteristics of the ship would depend on which of the 2 you're talking about, too. Gerard Kallenberg was captured by the Germans and retained most of her Dutch armament and equipment, whereas the sister ship, Isaac Spheers, was fitted with British guns and fire control systems. Of the 2, I think it'd be kinda neat to have a captured German premium, or maybe just incorporate it into a separate line. But if I had to pick between the Gerard Kallenberg and the Admiralen class, I'd rather have the former. She has enough interesting history to make her worth a purchase to some, and it doesn't seem like a bad ship in and of itself. In conclusion, the Netherlands. While they endured heavy losses in the initial stages of the war, they still put up a hell of a fight, and I'm sure that if their equipment had been more up-to-date and more numerous, many of their fights would have turned out differently. But the cruisers I described, and particularly the 1047 battlecruiser, would probably serve as crowd favorites to those who are interested in them. Before I wrap up completely though, I'd like to thank a subscriber, Silver Fireboat, for providing me with some research material for this video. Thanks a bunch, man. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more content like this in the future, and give the video a thumbs up. It really does go a long way. Until next time, I'm Gregor. Danke. Thanks so much for watching.